are heard via the Jack Spring Electric Heel Newsmaker hotline. Ms. Morgan Lamandre, she is the legal director. It's in Baton Rouge, the Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, acronym STAR. Hey, Ms. Morgan, welcome to Keel. Thanks for taking time for us, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I want to ask you, first off, tell us what your agency does so we can be familiar.
Yeah, so STAR is a sexual assault center, which means we provide advocacy, counseling, and legal services to sexual assault survivors, and all of our services are completely free and confidential.
So what is this involvement? Maybe that's too much of a too strong a word, involvement, that your organization suddenly is taking a look at Louisiana State University, specifically the football program. Am I overspeaking?
I wouldn't say you're overspeaking. I'd say that we as an organization in the community, especially where LSU is located, at least the primary campus, we do educational programs with the students. We also, obviously, because of the nature of sexual assault, have a lot of clients that come to us for services that are LSU students. So that's sort of how we are already involved with LSU. And obviously, when we see things that trouble us, we definitely give people notice about some problematic things that we've seen. And I'm not sure if you all are aware, but 3 years ago, we sent then LSU president King Alexander, the former athletic director, as well as Coach Orgeron, a letter sort of outlining some things that we were observing that we thought that they should look into.
Kind of put them on notice, huh?
What is it that you see, to use your term, that troubles you about the LSU football team right now?
Well, I think, a lot of people are actually focusing on the football team in general. I think overall, as a sexual assault organization, we see a culture of tolerance towards those that perpetrate sexual violence if they have value to institutions or systems. So I'm not trying to let them off the hook, but a lot of people are focusing on LSU football right this second, when really it's not just the football team, right? It's the institution of maybe not taking sexual assault allegations as seriously, or even if they do, the punishment, the consequences for those that they find responsible for committing the sexual assault, they don't necessarily take that as seriously.
Morgan, let me ask you this. What is the university doing most wrong? That's horrible grammar. I apologize. What is the biggest flaw in how LSU is handling reports of sexual assault?
Well, I think there's definitely many layers, and you can't just necessarily say one thing is most wrong. There's a couple of different circumstances, but I would say overall, from the article and from the people who have come forward, it seems to be when there is an initial complaint of sexual assault, it's that nothing is done to even look into it or to even necessarily investigate thoroughly what's happening. So I would say from a starting point, a lot of people tend to use the buzzwords, we take sexual assault allegations seriously. Well, from where I'm standing, we can't say that's true.
What is mandated? What are they required to do?
Yeah, so a lot of people tend to believe that, hey, if this is sexual assault, this is rape, it should just be sort of, pushed to law enforcement. Well, the problem with that is there could actually be two separate situations. Because of Title IX, the school has an obligation to make sure there is no form of sexual harassment or discrimination, because under federal law, sexual harassment, sexual assault is a form of sex discrimination. So they are obligated to make sure that the campus is safe, so that way no student's learning environment is jeopardized, their educational ability to pursue a degree is not affected by the climate of someone directly, potentially causing safety concerns on campus, or if they did sexually assault that person, the ongoing safety issues. So they have an independent obligation to look into allegations, investigate it thoroughly, making sure due process is, of course, a factor in all this, and then come to some sort of resolution, whether it be that, they didn't have enough evidence to be able to say for sure. And I think a lot of people get that confused with, if there's not enough evidence to discipline someone, then that must mean it's a false allegation.
There was an article, there was an article earlier this week, yahoosports.com, and it basically, it insinuated, if not outright accused, that starting at the top of the university, down to the athletic department, and then down to the actual office of Coach Ed Orgeron, were sort of brushing all these serious accusations of sexual misconduct and worse under the rug. And in fact, that article, that column, called for Orgeron to be fired. I'm sorry. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but I'm sure that you know what the gist of that story was. What do you think about those accusations from a pretty credible source?
Well, I would say that, based on all of the articles that have happened, all of the things that have come out, and even just looking in, we're not even talking about just sort of non-criminal conduct. There were actually criminal charges in many of these instances. And it seems that despite having that knowledge, despite, some of the coaches actually being told through text messages from their players, yes, I punched my girlfriend and all, they didn't act on that. And I think it's because a lot of times people really have trouble with believing that somebody you trust, somebody you value, somebody that you consider a friend or, someone you're mentoring would do something like that. And I think a lot of people tend to think, sexual abusers are monsters. The problem is with viewing sexual abusers that way is that we think, they don't live among us, right? They're the masked person jumping out of the bushes. No, they're very much look like all of us. And that is a really big problem because then people have trouble acting on pursuing, discipline or telling somebody. And I think from everything, if it does come to light that, with more of an investigation that they did fail to act, there does need to be consequences, or at least there needs to be redress to where survivors at that school will no longer feel like they can't come forward because nothing will be done.
Do you hold a coach responsible for his players' actions? At what point do you do that? You follow me?
Yeah, I think that it's not, there's a couple of different layers. There's definitely, if you're, at the top, you're the coach, and you take a very specific zero tolerance approach to sort of that toxic, and I know on your radio show, you're probably going to be like, what did you just say? But the toxic masculinity that comes from, it starts out as jokes about women. It starts out as just comments and whistling, and then it escalates behavior of just sort of not respecting women, respecting other people. I think that they are responsible for setting that standard. We all have free will, obviously. And as long as I think there's a standard set that kind of behavior isn't tolerated, obviously people can still do what they're going to do. But I think there also needs to be a climate that if you do something like this, then you will be kicked off this team. They certainly set a zero tolerance policy for when drugs happen. Mm-hmm. So I don't see why they couldn't have sort of that same atmosphere, that same zero tolerance policy for violence.